Welcome to the LBEB show. We're on episode number 16 talking how to get a massive chest. And obviously we have Colm on here who has a massive chest, so he can teach us how. 2 times world's strongest man competitor, New Zealand's strongest man, now studying to be a paramedic of all things. And you're going to lose that chest now to fit in the ambulance, as you mentioned. So
yeah,
that'll be something you got to do. No Mona today. She is out. But you also have me, professional strength and conditioning coach, write a lot of the content on LBEB now, and we'll have more podcast and video stuff soon. But remember, down in the description or the comments, there's the LBEB undergrad. You have all Colm strongman programs. You have all our strength and size programs, a lot of chest stuff in there as well, and you have all Mona's weightlifting programs. And I think we're just adding another weightlifting program, a 5-day-a-week one that is just being added currently. So things are going and cranking in there as we build, but we're going to dive into today's topic of building the chest. Is probably one of those muscle groups that are essentially probably the most trained other than the biceps for most dudes. The first thing you probably did when you went into the gym was either bench press or bicep curl. So I'm sure most people are relatively familiar with training chest, and it's often most people's favorite day of the week too. Chest day Monday, right? Or bench press Monday, either or.
That's definitely the tradition.
That's definitely the tradition for sure. So we're going to dive into everything to do with training chest, exercises, a little bit of the anatomy, personal experiences around training chest, and then sets and reps programming, cover it all so you know exactly what to do next time you go to the gym. But if we start with some basic anatomy, so I guess it went back and forth, I think, when people were saying, you know, you can't train upper and lower portions of muscle groups. And it's like, muscle groups are all just one muscle group. You do one movement and it trains everything. You can't isolate upper or lower. And what we see within research, that's not the case. We see more significant activations of upper and lower muscles. For example, if we take the abs, doing sit-ups or crunches preferentially or targets the upper abs more, versus say leg raises or hanging leg raises targets the lower abs more, as an example. So that's just one example in terms of the abs. Same thing you see down in the quads with leg extensions, and then same thing with the chest, since chest is the topic for today. And you have two main heads of the pec major, and that is the clavicular head, which would be our upper pecs and runs along clavicular, like the clavicle up here. And then the sternal head is slightly lower and is considered that middle lower chest. Now, we also have the pec minor, but we kind of just ignore that because it's not really going to help us much in terms of aesthetics and getting a bigger chest. So everything today will be focused on the pec major. So when we're talking the different muscle heads, upper and lower chest, we can target the upper chest by being on an incline, and then we can target the middle and lower chest by being flat or on a slight decline. Before we go into some of those exercises though, regarding incline, it seems that 30-degree incline is the best angle for targeting the upper chest that elicits the greatest muscle activation. As soon as you start getting to 45 degrees and up, you start recruiting a lot more front delt or shoulder into your pressing versus targeting the chest. So just bear that in mind when you're doing your bench pressing and incline benching for the upper chest. 30 degrees tends to be the best. It also feels really good when you're doing 30 degrees. Now, I wanted to pose this question to you, Colm, as we kind of dive into everything. When I was mentioning, obviously, incline, flat, and decline, do you ever use decline bench? I've never done a decline bench in my life. I don't think I ever will, and I don't really see a purpose for it. I don't know about you, if there's any value there for you regarding strength or size.
I haven't done it personally since probably before uni, but I did actually throw it into some of my general pop clients just for the sake of variety like a month ago, and reminded me why I don't use it, because although you're in a nice strong position, it's just a real horrible position to generate. Like, in theory it is the strongest position, but you're so unstable, so like you might have to hook your feet under those like things on the bench, which is like, it's horrible, especially if you're somewhat tall, like your legs are just forced together. So yeah, in general, I don't use it. Same with like decline dumbbell. I find it has the same issues.
Mm.
Whereas incline's definitely my favorite, especially for an aesthetic purpose. But yeah, decline itself, um, yeah, I can't say I'm the biggest fan of it.
Mm. The worst part is well, you don't have your feet on the floor, as you mentioned. It's more unstable because your feet are in the air, and then being in the decline because you don't have the feet on the floor, you can't drive with your legs, so you're limited by weight because it's purely upper body. But then you're hanging with your head below your hips,
Mm,
blood rushing to your head, like it doesn't serve much purpose. And you have to have a specific decline bench press to do it. So you have to be at a gym that has one as well. So there's always an equipment limitation along with the decline bench. All right, and then on top of the decline bench, we talked about the incline bench press as well. Cole mentioned there that's one of his favorites for targeting the upper chest. Are you I guess a fan? I know you mentioned dumbbell as well. You like, but do you have a preference between the barbell and dumbbell incline bench?
Honestly, I like both of them. Like I was thinking about this beforehand, which one I would recommend more. I think they both have their benefits. In like the barbell, I feel like you can just shift a little bit more load. Um, I kind of lean towards that for most people, but then at the same time, a little bit more range of motion, a little bit more flexible in terms of if you've got previous injuries and that you can rotate your
Mm,
hands around with the dumbbells. Ultimately, I think both of them are fantastic, and you use both throughout the year, maybe just at different points. Um, but yeah, I definitely, personally, I recommend most people, like aesthetically, I think it makes sense to focus more so on the incline, specifically at that 30 degrees for that upper pec, because um, I think for most people, right, if you're wearing a shirt all day, which most people are, like even if you're wearing like back in the day, people used to wear those V cut tops, like in the Jersey Shore times and whatnot. But the upper pec is more what people were going to see. Oh, you've been muted.
no, I'm here now. No, I was saying that that's a flashback.
Yeah, yeah, like those gigantic V-necks showing off the male cleavage were pretty popular. But I think yeah. So to me though, even for general pop, I focus. I think in general, it's the usual kind of X frame they talk about. You've got wide shoulders, upper pecs, and some traps and forearms. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's the stuff you see all day. So because of that reason, I tend to focus on the upper chest more for the people who I train who are purely focused on aesthetic reasons.
Mm,
And then I'm also a little bit higher, so like 45 degrees, even up to 60 for strongman.
nice. And interestingly, the bench press has kind of gone through phases as well. I mean, oh, shit, everything in fitness goes through damn phases. Every 10 years, something's good and then something's bad and whatever. But the bench press was, for a while, I guess it was vilified as a chest exercise, even though it is mainly a chest exercise. But people would be like, oh, it's shoulders and triceps as the main things, and it doesn't really grow your chest. And I guess there may have been some experiences of some people getting better results using machines and dumbbells and things. But even if we look at some of the interesting research around it, there's one good paper that actually correlated chest size with bench press 1RM. I think it was in high level throwers. And basically, chest size significantly correlated with 1RM bench press, and it explained around 86% of the lift as basically one of the factors. So essentially, the bigger your bench, the bigger your pecs. And I guess you typically see that in high level powerlifting as well, right? The bigger benches usually have massive titties.
Yeah, I would say definitely in general, always some exceptions, but to me, I always felt like that. I'm not sure if there was a specific paper people were referencing, but just anecdotally, if I watched people's training back in the day, like gym bros always, right? They always love to do bench press. They always do like assisted reps, the classic, it's all you,
Yeah.
bro. So if you only train bench that way, right, you're always cutting yourself short. And then if you switch your training to suddenly doing all these flies and stuff without having someone to assist you, it's going to make a big difference in that you're actually using your pecs, maybe on machine bench and then all these flies and whatnot. To me, like that was always my theory about it, but I wasn't sure if that kind of the bench press getting hate for not being a good pec exercise. I'm not sure if that was based on the study or not, but that's the
No, I don't
whenever
think
I
so.
spoke to people in person and like stuff that I have observed, mainly at AUT gym, that was the common thing was like, nah, bench is shit. I'm not feeling it at all. But it's because you've got someone helping you all the time, or you're cutting. Um,
Oh,
it's
short
funny
range of
as
motion.
well, yeah, that even though Spoto press now is like a popular variation in powerlifting, that's the other thing you'll see the typical gym bros do is not bringing the barbell all the way down to their chest. So you're not getting that full range of motion, not getting that full stretch, which then leads to them blaming the bench press. But it's a training issue.
Yeah, I actually never used to bench press back at AUT gym. I did eventually, but for years I didn't bench press because I was like, I didn't really feel like I didn't want to. I just overhead press and do everything
Yeah.
else, and I was all good. But I mean, bench press is always a staple within that. But while we're on the bench press, before we go to the other exercises, let's run through some of the technical things. I learned to bench press. Do you remember Paul Bally at the gym?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
Really good
bench
bench
press
presser.
specialist.
Massive
Yeah,
chest.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, what does he bench? Do you know? Wasn't it like in the 200 kilo? No, it
Yeah, it
can't
would
have
have
been.
been in the
Really?
200s. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I learned from him because obviously I was always in the gym, and so he was always working. So he ended up teaching me there, and I've just used that technique ever since, and it's been really, really good. So maybe let's cover a few of the main technical points, and the first one is the setup and being able to use your legs. Because what most people do is they kind of sit on the edge of the bench, they lie down, and they kind of have the bar there, and they just take the bar out of the rack, and they're like still moving their feet and whatever else to try and get it out. And the biggest thing that Paul taught me was when I sit up on the bench, I start with my head behind the bar. I pull myself up slightly with the bar so I can pull my shoulder blades back, pin them into the bench, and then shoot my hips down the bench while leaving my feet on the floor. So you end up having your feet in line with your hips by the end of it, essentially. So you have a huge stretch on your quads and hip flexors because your knees are shoved forward and your hips are shoved forward, but your feet are in the same place. And then blending that with a video I watched, I think it was Dave Tate on Elite FTS as well. Like, you shouldn't be able to move your feet. You shouldn't be able to move your knees at all. Everything should be solid in place. And that's how you're going to create that stable base to be able to push with your legs as you bench. Is there anything you would add to that, Colm?
No, that's pretty much it. It naturally makes you have a decent arch. It's not we're not talking about having a crazy powerlifting style arch with a small range of motion.
Hmm.
But I think that's a nice way to keep basically increase stability so you can use a decent load. Um, the other thing that he taught me was to really grip the bar nice and hard. I find
Hmm.
that makes a nice difference. But yeah, in general, you want to be as tight as possible. Um, just like you were saying. And if you think about it, like I have quite a lot of people ask me, again, more so general population, like why go through all that effort to get tight? Like, isn't it cheating, or doesn't that just mean you're artificially, adding weight, but the pecs aren't necessarily doing more? But it definitely still makes a difference. It just allows you to express the strength that you have a little bit better.
Yeah.
So it's like if you look at a machine bench, or like depending on what the machine is, but in general, it's designed in a way to put you in a natural position, or sorry, in a strong position. Whereas we're having to move around the bench to create that position. But that's the idea.
Hmm.
Exaggerated Swiss ball bench press. So doing a bench press when you're on a Swiss ball, it's so unstable. You can't load it well. You're not going to grow very well from that. And then on the flip side, we've got a nice, stable, tight position, relatively safe. You're not going to suddenly, swing off like a Swiss ball, which means you can load it, which in theory should lead to the pecs doing more work.
Yeah, and I think people get confused and they don't want to be tight and use their legs because they want to quote unquote isolate the pecs and the upper body without the leg drive. But you significantly limit the weight you can use doing that. And if you want to overload the pecs, yes, you can use leg drive. Yeah, okay, that might reduce some of the effort your pecs need to use during the concentric, but they still have to control it down during the eccentric portion of the lift. And if you've got more load on the bar, you're going to have more tension, and more tension theoretically equals more muscle growth. So using leg drive even during a muscle building focus for your bench press, I think is always a good idea, and just kind of using that same technique. But what about grip width? What grip width are you typically using for the bench?
Normally I don't really like ultra wide unless they're doing powerlifting, with a goal just to shorten the range. But in general, I recommend people go like start with shoulder width and then go a little bit wider than that. For most people, I would say like pinkies on the ring, but then you could go a little bit wider or a little bit narrower depending on like how long your arms are basically, and
Nice.
how wide your chest is.
Yeah, I'm a close grip bench through and through, no matter what. I don't. I typically go like a thumb or maybe even half a thumb from the knurling, from the middle
Yeah.
knurling there. So I'm close grip bench always because one, it's a strong position to press from. Two, it's what I've always, I guess, prescribed, especially within athletic populations, where obviously bench press is not the sport, but this, to get stronger for the sport, I prefer to have a slightly close grip. It's just easier on the shoulders and targets the triceps really nicely. Of course, obviously bench press still targets the triceps, but a closer grip targets the triceps even better. And I want massive triceps all the time, so I always close grip bench as well. So that's the way I like to go about it, and I don't usually stray from that either. And then along with the setup, once you set up tight on the bench, it's important that you have the bar almost in line with your forehead. So it will be behind your eyes when you're looking up. So you can roll the bar forward to the front of the J hooks. And you can roll the bar forward to the front of the J hooks, and then it should be directly over your eye line. And when you do that, it means that when you take the bar out, you can almost like pull over the bar out of the rack. And it means that when you do press, you're not going to press into the J cups on the way up as well. So they don't get in the way. Are you, when you're teaching the bench comp, are you teaching benching with like that arc, so almost like you're pressing up and back, or is it just like straight up and down?
I teach slightly back towards the chin, in a straight line. But ultimately, I tend to just these days go with what the person is gravitating towards, provided there's
Yeah.
not anything too crazy in terms of outliers. But assuming all things being equal, I like to go relatively low on the chest, and then you're pressing slightly back in a diagonal line. I don't like um, the slightly off the chest, you're really tucked in, and you suddenly flare and do that way.
Oh yeah.
It's more of a thing with shirted benching, because you've got the shirt to protect you in that range.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, in general, bar path wise, I would go with that. And I also, in terms of tuck, I would go, let's say this is 90 degrees, I would just
Yeah.
teach slightly
40,
in.
yeah.
So that's something else I thought I'd mention is I don't know where it is, if it's someone making it popular on Instagram. Back in the day, I used to see this in the magazines, but they would talk about bench pressing to your neck
Oh,
because
like
you
a
get a
guillotine
massive stretch on
press.
the, yeah, you get massive
Yeah.
stretch on the pecs. Some bodybuilders like it, but it has, even assuming your shoulders are okay with it, it has the same drawbacks as we were talking about before in terms of if you're less stable. Ultimately, this is a less stable position, which means you can use less weight. So if you're wanting a nice big stretch on the pecs, I would do other exercises instead and use the bench press for what it's good for, which is overall compound heavy loaded
Hmm.
pec exercise or
Yeah. Let's
pressing exercise.
yeah let's talk about some of those other exercises. What else are you looking for? So we've covered the main rocks. You're looking at all the bench press variations and all the dumbbell bench press variations. But what else are you adding on top of that to maximize chest development?
So I do like flies, kind of the same deal, incline flies or regular flat ones. I think both of these are quite nice. I would rather use cables or if they've got access to them, but dumbbells absolutely still work.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you've got the option, I think in general, I would take advantage of the big, strong pressing exercises by being in a nice, stable position using heavy load. And then to really emphasize the stretch, I'd go with some kind of fly variation, um, whether that's cable crossovers, cable flies, dumbbell flies. I think they're
Mm.
all fantastic, again, provided they're done correctly, which means relatively straight arms, nice big range of motion, And ideally, you're wanting to have it in a position where it's still putting strain on your pec at the top of the movement. So that's the downside of the dumbbells, because it's
Mm.
not too hard at the top. Um, yeah, though in general, flies would kind of be my other main movement I would like in there.
Yeah.
Curious what your thoughts are on flies, or pullovers are something I've wanted to experiment a bit more with, but in general, I haven't. I don't really feel them on my pecs.
No, neither. Actually, we've got a friend here that comes to train, and he only feels pullovers in his pecs. He doesn't feel them in his lats, which is
I've heard
weird.
that. Yeah, I've heard that as well. And like, do you remember back in the day, like the Flex magazines? Arnold would always recommend them for pecs.
Yeah.
Personally, I can feel it in my pecs if I squeeze my pecs, but it doesn't feel like they're loaded. It
Yeah.
just feels like I'm. But yeah, that's something I want to experiment with a little bit more. But otherwise, yeah, flies,
Yeah. Yeah. The
pressing and
flies,
flies.
obviously, within athletic populations, flies don't have any place in any program for me. But if we're talking purely aesthetics and getting a big chest, yep, flies are great. As Cole mentioned, cables are really good because obviously you get peak stretch and or you get peak tension at the stretch, but also you get tension at the top when you're squeezing. Whereas the dumbbells, you only get the tension rarely when you're stretched, which is important. But it's nice to be able to have that at the top too. Um, it can I find it can, like, if you've got a real, like, maybe a shoulder that's not so hot right now, the flies can aggravate it a little. I find sometimes with one of my shoulders, it can feel a little funny in that stretch position. One way you could get around that is if you doing flies with chains, but obviously that kind of works against you since you kind of want the load in that stretch position. And obviously with chains, the load decreases as you get through the stretch, similar like a band. So, but chains are something you can use, and it's a cool little variation if you're going to burn out with them or something. That's one thing you can definitely do as a variation. The only other problem with the cable fly, standing cable flies are good, but if you're going to do it on a bench or something, or an incline bench, the setup is a bitch because you're going to take the whole cable
Yeah.
column, put a bench in there. If you're doing that in a commercial gym, everyone's going to hate you. Um, so that's more difficult. But one thing that we haven't talked about is push-ups, and push-ups are always like the forgotten cousin for the chest, and it's probably because it's such a basic exercise. You can do it anywhere, and it doesn't require much else. And you can load it heavy, but most people kind of just rip out push-ups and that's it. But for me, I credit a lot of my chest size to doing decline push-ups and a shit ton of them, say at the end of training sessions, or I would superset them with things like flies or superset them with triceps and things like that, and you're getting extra chest volume. I don't know if you use the push up much, Colm, if that's part of your training at all, or part of your client's training. Before getting back to the podcast, I want to let you know that down in the description is a link to the Lift Big, Eat Big Underground. And within that, you get access to all our training programs, online courses, and into our private Discord community, where all three of us are in there to help you with whatever it is with your training. Regarding the programs, we have Mona, who's done all of the weightlifting cycles. We have Colm, who's done the strongman off-season and strongman competition programs. Then we have all the hallmark Lift Big, Eat Big training programs, Pump Dragon, Flanks Method, and many more. And I've also added muscle building specialization programs within that, and are continuing to update and add training programs into our app. You also get access to Mona's Weightlifting Mastery online course, and you get to join these calls live in the audience where you can ask members only question and answers at the end of each episode. So if that sounds like you, go down in the description. There's a link there to the Lift Big, Eat Big Underground, and that'll give you access to everything I just mentioned.
So I don't tend to do them much these days. Back when I was lighter, I actually used to like them quite a bit. I really like doing them with that little bit of elevation, so you can have a decent range of motion. But I did actually use them this morning with some general pop clients in that same, just with a step, like a step box under each hand, so you can have a little bit of extra range. In general, though, like with training, the majority of my clients at the moment are strongman athletes, so we don't really do too many push-ups. There's so many other pressing variations that take priority, but I do think
Yeah.
push-ups are a great exercise. Um, Again, yeah, I think it does kind of depend on body weight. Not because they can't do it, but it means if you've got someone who's weighing over 300 pounds and they're already doing a lot of pressing, it means you're adding in another relatively heavy pressing exercise.
Mm.
Um, but otherwise, I think they're great. And aesthetically, I think they can definitely help fill out the pecs for sure. Um, so yeah, overall,
Mm.
I'm a fan of push-ups. Never really experimented with them. I feel like I, again, at AUT might have played around with some weighted push-ups, but
Yeah.
same thing, just a bit of a pain getting someone to chuck some weight on your back, and if you're training alone or whatever.
Mm.
Uh, have you got any? I don't know. Have you ever played around with that much?
Yeah, the weighted push up is something I've used often. If I'm doing it by myself, I'll use a band, but I don't like the band
Oh yeah,
um, compared to the plate. The problem with the band is you don't get the load at the bottom, where obviously you want the most of the load, and then on the way up, like it thrashes your shoulders um, versus the feeling of your pecs and triceps. So like your front delts just absolutely nailed. Like that tendon area, that bicep tendon area,
yeah,
gets super aggravated when you're doing heavy band push-ups. So, I mean, they're okay. I'll do them every now and then, but I prefer not to. I prefer the plate on the back. Obviously, you need a training partner. Actually, when we were training for international rugby, the gym we had, one of the gyms we had was like a shoebox. So I had to train a whole damn international rugby team out of a shoebox. And because we had a shoebox that had one rack, one squat rack, and like one bench. Not like a bench press, just like a bench and like a cable station. I was like, fuck. So we actually did weighted push-ups was our main pressing movement
yeah.
instead of bench press, And these are the things you can do if you have a home gym and maybe you don't have a bench press set up. Weighted push-ups are legit as they come. You're getting it's an upside down bench press. You're just pressing yourself instead of pressing a bar. So that's definitely worth doing, especially if you don't have the equipment or the space to do other things. Man, you can make gains with push-ups. The nice thing as well with body weight, it's not that stressful. You can smash volume with push-ups. I mean, everyone's seen various push-up challenges and 100 push-ups a day, etc. People can do that without blowing up their elbows and shoulders and all sorts of stuff, which makes it really valuable. Like one of the things I like doing or like prescribing is hitting rep targets at the end of sessions. So, for example, you can pair push-ups and inverted rows. You're aiming for 50 push-ups and 50 inverted rows, and you're just going back and forth until you hit your rep target. And those are easy ways to get volume without a lot of stress. That, like, if you're going to do 50 reps of some kind of heavy bench press, and that's that's pretty much how I like to push up. So that's one way you can add that into your training to add extra volume without that much stress. I think that covers most chest exercises. I mean, the only other chest exercise is a machine chest press, and obviously there's multiple different machines, different angles, different handles, etc. Is a machine chest press something you prescribe often for clients who have goals of just strength and size? Is it something you would have used for strongman?
I think I have used it as an assistance move for strongman. It really depends on just what the client has available and working around injuries, basically, and like where they are in a training cycle. But in general, I do like the machine. I would still, like in general, start off with some kind of heavy compound pressing. I think the machine press is a nice like compromise, but it really depends on how, like, there's so many factors, like you're saying. Like, say myself, it's very hard for me to find a machine press variation that feels nice. It just, like, I just don't really fit in there. Sometimes when
Yeah.
I do fit in there, I fit, but it feels really compromising. Like, I've torn my pec a few times, well, not a few, but a couple times, and there's so many factors that go into it. But I do. There was someone I'm not training anymore in Aussie. We used to have. He just used to love this variation of like incline machine press.
Yeah.
He was a strongman athlete, but we used to do that because he had limited dumbbells available. The press felt really good on his body. He enjoyed doing it, and it was one of the ones that you could load relatively efficiently. That's the other thing. Some of them have, again, I've noticed it because of being relatively tall, having long arms. They have this really weird resistance curve because
Yeah.
they're not designed for like they're designed for X body proportion, and then everyone else has to fit into it. And it's not like a bench where you can manipulate your body around it. You can try some, like if you watch the IFBB pro bodybuilders, they have their little tricks to getting set up and whatnot.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, that's not an option a lot of the time. But for this client, it was, so we used it.
Yeah. The machine chest press is nice. I remember, I think one of my very first training programs, well, I still started when I was still in school. There was a plate loaded incline bench machine at school. It was legit. It was like,
Yeah.
I think I don't know if the handles were fixed. I don't think the handles were fixed. I think they could still move a little, but it was that superset with push-ups, and that was legit.
Mm,
That's a
yeah.
legit little combo there. So those little things that you can try. I mean, we'll get to the programming section in a bit, but those little things you can try to kind of spice up your chest training. Obviously, it's not something you always want to do, but we will get there. But I wanted to actually touch on, before we go into some of the programming style stuff, is specialty bars, because many people, I mean, there's actually quite a few people that can't bench press, shoulder issues, elbow issues, whatever it is. Are there any specialty bars that you like, Colm, to get around this?
I tend to go for dumbbells opposed to the barbell variations. Like
Mm.
if they've got shoulder injuries, I find just having the ability to rotate your hands around really can help you find a spot that's easier on the shoulders.
Yeah.
But if the shoulders are okay, I have actually used, is it called the Duffalo bar? It's like a bent bar like this.
Yeah, it can
So
be
if you
bar,
do it,
but Chris Duffin obviously made his own one and
yeah.
coined it.
So if you do a bench press with that, it gives us just a little bit of extra range of motion. I've used that more so with clients with the goal of powerlifting. But what else have we got specialty bar wise for bench?
Swiss
Obviously,
bar, Swiss
like
bar,
Swiss bar, any
multi grip.
block variations
Yeah,
I've used a lot, but again for the goal of strength. Um,
yeah. I
the
like I like
Swiss bar,
I like the Swiss bar just because you have the neutral grips and you have the slightly angled grips on it. It can feel a little
yeah,
funny though when you haven't used it before. Like the first time you use it, it kind of feels a little unstable because it can kind of rock a little because it's kind
yeah.
of flat with the handles neutral. It feels good on the shoulders because you're not stuck in that pronated position, but it takes a little bit to get used to just because it doesn't feel as stable. But that's definitely an option too, and they're not too expensive either. A couple $100 you can pick one up
Mm.
relatively cheap. Check the Rogue Boneyard or something like that. You might find one in there. But yeah,
Swiss bar incline, like I've used a shitload with clients, but again, that's more because we're using it as a log press assistance movement. Like
yeah,
specifically for pecs, the only one I would really probably, other than dumbbells, I would think is probably the Duffalo bar.
yeah,
But even then, yeah, when I have used it, it's been for the focus of strength
yeah.
as an
I think
assistance move.
I think the other one, like I really like, I do all my pressing now with fat bars.
Oh
So
yeah,
using
of
using
course.
the
I
axle,
always, yeah.
yeah. If I had my
Every time
way,
I talk to you, I forget about it because I always, to me, axle just means continental clean and press. So I always forget it. But yeah, it's really good at doing your pressing with it.
oh, I love it. It's like it's different, strengthens your hands and wrists. Like you think like, okay, I'm just pressing with a thicker bar. It's not going to do anything for my hands. I'm not having to like hold or grip anything like you would, for example, when I pull up a row on a fat bar. But if you haven't done it before or haven't done it in a while, and you load something heavy on a fat bar, the pain you feel in your thumbs from having to support that is real, and it's something that you need to adapt to, that strength to be able to hold something like that. And I think I've mentioned before in the podcast, if I had my way, I would, for all collision combat sports, I would replace every single pressing variation with a fat bar or fat bar or axle bar. I think the benefits are way too good to not do it. You don't need to bench with the regular bar. Bench with the fat bar. It's going to give you so much more. Um, I don't have a fat bar, but I've got fat grips. So the double benefit of doing that on a barbell is you get the duffel, like your cambered bar, you get the extra range at the bottom because the fat grip gives you like maybe another inch
Oh yeah, yeah.
of range at the bottom because the barbell touches your chest, but then you've still got the fat grip. So that's something I've been doing recently, and absolutely loving that. So that's one. Yeah, that's a bar that I think most gyms should have. We're definitely going to get one soon. But the problem with most fat bars is if you get them cheap, one, they don't have knurling, which is the biggest pain in the ass when you have a fat bar without knurling. And two, they're so damn light. They're like hollow pipes. Have you felt those ones like from Rogue and stuff that are like 10 kilos? They're like way lighter than a barbell. It's like,
Yeah. They just feel like
like they're going
I
to
hate
break.
them.
Yeah, I hate
Yeah.
them too. I absolutely hate them. But
I've actually
at least,
broken a few of those.
really,
Yeah, in competition one time we had. I've seen it happen in training twice, and then it happened to me once in competition. We had an axle clean and press, and I dropped it. It was relatively even, but it just broke one of the sides, and yeah,
damn, yeah,
hollow through the middle.
yeah. So ideally avoid those. I know, because I was doing a lot of research on different barbells. If you go to liftbigep.com, there's actually best barbells for home gym and best budget barbells I've written recently. You can check those out. But I was looking at fat bars, and it looks like Elite FTS has the best fat barbell on the market because all the other brands are all the powder coated, no knurling, hollow ones. Elite FTS one, I think it's 70 pounds. I think their fat bar with knurling, which is serious weight for a barbell. What's that in kilos? Like 30 something kilos, 30 kilos for their fat bar. So you know it's
Definitely
going to
makes a
last.
difference.
Yeah, for sure with knurling. But in most strongman competitions, they use axles like smooth axles, right? As well,
Yeah,
like
they're
Apollon's axle
honestly
smooth.
horrible. They do everything they can to make it as horrible as possible, I swear. But yeah,
But
they're
you can use
smooth.
straps though,
So
right?
if it's a deadlift, yes.
Yeah.
But for the
Oh yeah.
continental clean and press, like it's just a pain because you're battling like you're trying to chalk up air as much as possible to create friction. Nowadays they have those grip shirts. I don't know if you've seen them, but
Oh
they've got
yeah,
like a
yeah.
rubber finish. They can help alleviate it, but it's yeah, they're a bit of a um, horrible movement. And I think I've said before, I'm just not a fan of the continental clean and press. Other than for ego, it's definitely cool, like in terms of just lifting a lot of load. But as an actual exercise to build muscle or strength, I don't think it's that great.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, pressing with a fat bar, I definitely like.
Yeah. You can push press with it as well and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. That Apollon's axle is smooth, which is a pain. So if you do have a bar that doesn't have any markings on it, you have to probably mark the center of it with some tape and things like that. Otherwise, you end up lifting it lopsided half the time, and that is a pain in the ass. But yeah, definitely get knurling on your fat bar. But we should jump into some programming for the chest. How do you like to structure? I don't know if you probably don't program pure like chest days, like some bodybuilders do. But so how would you usually incorporate a lot of these in a training split?
Like, say I had a general pop person who just wants to get bigger overall with a focus on chest, I would probably have two kind of you know, chest a little bit more focused days. Would still be doing other stuff in them, but for chest specifically in those workouts, I would either start one of them with an incline and the other one with a flat bench. Otherwise, I would go
Mm.
one with dumbbell incline and the other with incline barbell. Um, some kind of assistance move to that, and then I like to finish off with. Um, I could go either way, whether we do some kind of like machine um, press or machine like variation second, and then finish with like a push up or something, or we could do that vice versa and finish with the a more fly type movement. But in general, like across the board, like to move from the heavy stable exercise um, to something with a little bit more range of motion, but a little bit of more stability from the machine itself or your position, and then finish with. I always like to finish with some kind of pump.
Yeah,
So whether that's again another machine variation, if it's a heavyweight person, or if they're super strong in the loads they've been doing are so massive, or a push-up variation is also a good option.
nice. Yeah, I'm with you with that. With finishing something with some kind of pump or even some kind of stretch. Like, for example, a really simple chest day could be something like you start with your bench press, and that might be 3 sets of 8. As an example, I typically like 6 to 10 reps on the bench. I mean, you can go 10, 15, 20 if you want, but I think bench press is better served just to keep it for what it is, and that's heavy loading. And then move to your dumbbell inclines. Or you can reverse that order if you're prioritizing upper chest. So you could do incline bench to start, and then flat dumbbell bench, etc. So, but for this one, bench press, then dumbbell inclines, you might do 10 to 12 reps for 3 sets after that, and then you could finish with a superset. It could be like a standing cable fly, sets of 12, and then superset with machine chest press if you wanted a massive pump for like 15 reps and do that superset. So that's something you could do as an example. I've seen some other programs where the isolation exercise is kind of sandwiched inside the program. So you might do like an incline bench, and then you might do a dumbbell fly, and then you might come back and do like dumbbell pressing and stuff like that. Well, that was interesting. I've tried that. It actually works quite well. I thought the dumbbell flies and stuff would really take away from everything else, but it doesn't. Um, so that's definitely something you can try as well for some variation within a program. I mean, if you're doing a pure chest day, like a bro split, that's definitely something you can do. If you're doing other training splits, upper lower splits, push pull legs, and things like that, obviously that will change because you'll have other exercises you need to incorporate within that session. So you might stick with more of the bigger rocks, um, dumbbell benching and bench press variations, and maybe doing less of the other stuff like the isolation flies and whatnot. Is there anything else you wanted to add to the programming, Colm?
No, I pretty much agree with you. I was just going to mention how you were talking about swapping between the fly and the press variation. I have used the old pre-exhaust method just to help with that mind-muscle connection, I suppose, for getting people to feel their pec. So sometimes if someone is purely focused on gaining size, they're not so much concerned about strength at all. You can do, and they're saying that they just don't feel their pecs working when they bench press. You could do a set of flies, or a few sets of flies or cable crossovers, whatever the variation is, prior to your bench press work. So you do that as the first exercise of the program or of the day. I wouldn't really recommend that doing long term, but I think it has its use to help you get that feeling like, oh, my pecs are actually working.
Yeah, yeah, especially if you really feel your shoulders during the bench over your pecs. That's definitely something you can do. I guess another thing you can do as well, if you really feel your shoulder taking over, is using dumbbells, as Cole mentioned. There, you typically can feel the pecs better using dumbbells, typically for some people. So that's something to definitely play around with. And while we talked about the importance of the bench press and stuff for building the pecs, you don't have to bench press. There's no exercises that you have to do. Actually, one we actually didn't touch on were dips as a chest exercise, and that's because I always forget about dips because I never do them because it fucks up my sternum really bad. I'm sure there's someone listening to this that also runs into the same problem. Essentially, I cannot do any dips, and if I do dips, my sternum and the same spot is so sore that I can't do other lifting. Even coughing and sneezing hurts and things like that, and it will be like that for months. So I fully avoid dips, but obviously dips are a good chest exercise. I don't know if you've come across anyone with the same issue, Colm, or dips are something that you use.
Yeah, I've definitely had people with that sternum issue. But I do like dips as another finisher. So I'm a fan of dips both for triceps and chest, and also just in general as a strength exercise. Really good exercise resistance for pressing. But with if you specifically want to hit the chest, if you lean forward that little bit, so it turns it a little bit more horizontal, so you're not so upright, which will hit a little bit more tries. If you lean forward, you get a really nice squeeze on the pecs on the way up. It's a nice finisher if you're not, a super heavyweight. And I think I probably only ever done it once when I was in my aesthetic phase, but I thought it was cool. Have you ever seen the old bodybuilding clips of like Branch Warren? You know Branch Warren?
Yep, I know Branch Warren.
Bodybuilder, how he's got
Yep.
the chains around his neck. He's doing dips.
Yeah.
So it's a finisher like drop set. If you got let's say you got 5 chains around your neck, you do as many as you can, then you chuck a chain off, and then you
And
keep
that's what you
going.
did.
I did it once, and it was a lot of fun. But then I could never. I think I just could never be bothered picking up all the chains to get in that position. But the idea is there. Like it's a nice finisher, and it gives you, if you want to do it with chains, it gives you that hardcore feeling.
Oh yeah.
The classic hardcore training. Just like that's what I was thinking of when you were saying you could do flies with chains.
Oh
Anything
yeah.
chain just feels hardcore.
Dude, we need to do an episode on accommodating resistance at some point. Bands and chains and lifts. So maybe we'll do that next week, and we can cover that stuff and the what, why, how, etc. Actually, the first time I squatted with chains, it was actually with Danny Niamani in the AU gym. He was
Oh, yeah.
setting me up in there and getting me sorted. So we'll definitely have to touch on chains, bands, all that kind of stuff next week, kind of like the purposes and doing it. But you're talking about the old school training stuff, man. I love the old school shit. I mean, I've shown dinosaur training on here how many times now, but out from one of those books, John Grimmick from like the 1940s, he was like Mr. America, but he was also on like the USA weightlifting Olympic team and all that kind of shit. He has a squat routine, and I did this in 2018, I think it was. And his squat routine was one set of 20, 15, 12, 10, 8, 6. And it was, yeah, I did that. I ended up, I think I finished the 6 at 140 kilos. So I think I just went up in 10 kilo increments. So I did 90 for, hang on. I did 140 for 6, 130 for 8, 120 for 10, 110 for 12, 100 for 15, and 90 for 20. So reverse order. Yeah, 90 for 20 and then all the way through. But I had to work my way up to that. I didn't just come in and do it. I'd do like the first few sets and then next week and stuff like that. Man, that's just brutal. But the way that some of those guys trained back in the day, like before juice, dude, these guys were nuts. And they were jacked as. Though some of those old routines are awesome.
Yeah. I feel like the overarching thing to me is whatever training you do, it has to be hard. It has to be at least somewhat hard. Like whether you're because like I've had people talk about, if I'm recommending someone 7 RPE, they're like, that's too easy, but really 7 RPE is pretty hard. If
7 RPE hard on squats is hard.
Yeah, it's hard. And like even say, the West Side style where they'll do 8 doubles for speed. It's still, even though it's such a light percentage, it's still hard to like maximally accelerate. I feel like as long as you're training hard, you should, like, you're 90% of the way there. Yeah. And like those old school dudes just personified hard work. Like, they might not have known all the other stuff, but their hard work really made whatever they did pretty effective.
Yeah, and a lot of it now is obviously people talking about, can't do too. I mean, to an extent, yeah. I mean, we'll talk about the stuff like you shouldn't do so much that you're absolutely dead all the time. But there is something to doing some of these things and just not even worrying about this stuff and just doing it for fun. Like, you don't see anyone anymore doing stupid shit. Like, I used to do pull-ups, but I would go like around the world through all the pull-up bars, like pull up and then move to the next one without dropping, then pull up, then move to the next one because there was like 3 different attachments and then different grips and shit like that, just burning out, or then just like doing curls down the whole rack, like running the rack and shit. You don't see anyone doing this stuff anymore.
Yeah, they used to be the thing, eh? Back in the day, I swear, every routine you would see like, okay, finish off by running the rack. Whether it's curls, like lateral raises.
Yeah.
That's true. I used to see people doing it at gyms all the time as well. It would actually be quite annoying because they get in the way. They take up like, they use every single pair of dumbbells on their way down.
Yeah.
So it's probably a good thing. But it definitely gave you a mean pump, when you did that.
Yeah, and I mean, you don't see a lot of that stuff anymore. I think people have kind of turned to like I understand we are science people. I mean, we've both published research, done our masters, sport and exercise science. We do love it, but obviously that's kind of trickled right down into all the beginner lifters and novice lifters too, and they've kind of taken it and run with it, where everything has to be optimized, optimal volume, optimal this, optimal that. Yeah. But at some point, just hard graft and doing something for fun instead of just optimizing things. If you want to max out, it might not be the best idea, but sometimes you do it. I'm sure. I mean, we've both maxed out, far too often. Stuff like that. You learn from that. You develop from that too as well. And then, I mean, we've probably done stupid shit all the damn time. I can't remember what else I've done. I mean, program hopping, just stupid volume.
That could be a whole episode on itself, eh? Like every stupid thing that we've done training-wise.
I can't remember what else I've done now. I mean, other than maxing out pretty much every week, benching on Swiss balls, doing dumbbell bench on Swiss balls.
What got you into doing those?
That was just what was prescribed to me back when I first started. Huh. Actually felt all right though at the time. Yeah. But not something I'll do now. Yeah, that's just doesn't make any sense. But back in the day, that was kind of like a thing.
Yeah.
So
I definitely think nowadays this, especially with Instagram, like the desire to chase optimal, it's not realistic. Like, if you did this, like that's the thing. I feel like no one actually does this, but if you only chased like whatever everyone recommends as optimal, you'll do like two different exercises for X amount of reps, and you just do that forever. That's it. Like you've found optimal.
Yeah.
If you look at like I don't know, say Paul Carter's like maximizing hypertrophy or whatnot, um, you just end up getting stuck in this thing which is not a realistic uh, representation of like lifestyle and of
Yeah.
life.
And optimal always changes, right? As you develop and get stronger and you can handle more training. The problem is as well, like when you never push to those limits, you don't know what they are. So you're always training in this like quote unquote easy zone because you've never really pushed it. You don't know what failure really feels like. You've never squatted to failure, even though it's not advisable, but you should at one point you should probably do it. Obviously I think we've done it. I mean, I've squatted, done lots of 20 rep squats and stuff like that, and feel your feet burning and just doing crazy shit to failure.
Mm,
Like that
yeah,
stuff will teach you how far you can push, and then we'll kind of give you an idea of how far you can actually go. And then just same thing with even like training frequency and stuff, like how often you can actually train. Like sometimes you might feel like shit, but you don't really, maybe you don't need a day off. Maybe you can do some other things. Maybe you can bench 5 times a week. I know there's many people have successfully benched with high frequency and added many kilos to their maxes doing that.
yeah.
Obviously, throw out that myth of 2-to-1 pushing to pull ratio and things like that, and
Mm.
whatever else. But none of that stuff really matters in the real world. Uh, it's just about trialing it yourself.
They're nice guidelines, eh?
Yeah,
Just guidelines, but ultimately, like we're so individual as people that, and like all our lifestyles and environments are different. It makes a huge difference.
yeah,
Say for an example of this is at the moment I'm only doing resistance training twice a week for about an hour each time, so quite small.
mm-hmm.
Back in the day, so there's a certain amount that I can tolerate, right, under these
Yeah,
circumstances. Back in the day, like my best results ever came from running. I don't know if you know Mike Zaldos, I think his name is.
yeah,
Zaldos. His on his PhD, he did this daily undulating periodization and powerlifting program, and I took that and kind of modified it. And best results of my life, but I was at the time writing my thesis, so I was pretty much sedentary most of the time.
mm.
I was a student, like relatively low stress, didn't have much going on, and all my focus was on just eating and hitting these numbers.
Yep,
And like, yeah, that like in theory, that's to me like that's what I've responded to best training wise my whole life. Um, if I took that and tried to apply the same thing now with my current schedule, I would just burn out and crash, probably get
yeah,
injured so fast. So, like
yeah,
you said, optimal changes over time.
yeah, man. Training when you're a student at uni, dude. That was the shit for gains. That's the secret hack to gains is be a student at uni, and all you have to do is study and maybe work a part-time job, and then everything else you just train and eat. Like that's big. I think during that time I was running 5-3-1 for a long time. I think during that worked well for me with a bit of that volume and being a little more sub max and pushing the weights there. But then I'd always do heaps of strongman shit too. Out the back on the grass outside the easy gym. I'd take
Yeah,
the farmers bars out there and do farmers walks there and shit like that. Like that was epic.
yeah, good
Even,
times.
yeah, man. Yeah, man. But was there a sled there too? Yeah, there was a
Yep.
sled, wasn't there? Yeah.
And there was a tire. There was a few tires. There were stones.
Oh, I didn't do the stones. I'm too small for
Yeah,
that. I was small then.
yeah,
Oh, good. I think that concludes our episode. But make sure you go down the description for the Lift Big Big Underground. You have all comms, strongman programs, Mona's weightlifting programs, or the Lift Big Big Strength and Size programs, all for $37 a month. It's dirt cheap. Plus, you get access to all of us within the private community. You can ask any questions about your training, about nutrition, just shit, anything to do with anything. You can just ask us in that private Discord, and we'll help you out as part of that price. So it's essentially a bargain having your own personal trainers or coaches for that one price plus your programs. But also make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. I mean, we rebranded this channel when we took over Lift Big Eat Big in 2021, and we've just been losing subs because obviously we're not the original owner. So we need you guys to sub for us to bring us back up to numbers. So make sure you do that. Make sure you share it with everyone, and we will see you next week.